How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion today. What triggers the need to write up an inmate? We're going to talk about the difference between a nuisance charge and a more serious charge, and basically when can we employ discretion when it comes to writing up an inmate. Now, this dialogue is sort of initiated by a gentleman who sent me an email, and he said, Mr. Gangi, I watched the video on should inmates be written up for everything. At my job, working with juveniles, minor rule violations or write-ups for failure to comply with rules, programs, horseplays, and inappropriate behavior. I wanted to hear your viewpoint when writing up inmates using discretion. For example, should I write up youthful offenders for breaking line norms, such as unsecuring hands just to scratch their head or looking around when they should have their head forward? Would always writing them up be punitive? Sorry, guys. I don't know if it's my eyesight or the writing there. Maybe my eyesight on that one. Guys, my guests today are going to be Russ Hamilton and Joe Pomponio. Hey, guys, just want to mention before we start the dialogue, I just want to give this to the person who wrote me the email. I don't care what the intent is of an inmate. If they're breaking out of their cuffs or whatever it is you're using to restrain them to scratch their head, the greater concern is definitely not that they're scratching their head, but the fact that they're breaking out of those restraints. That's something that you're going to want to maybe document and put an alert on, and we'll get to that. I just want to make sure I don't forget to mention that. That was important to me to mention. Okay, guys, so before I bring on Russ and Joe, or Joe and Russ, we have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. That book is available and on the market. This book is used for used for training and corrections all across the country. It's available on Amazon. Link to this is in the description. And for those that have supported this book, thank you, guys. I truly appreciate it. And we also have these two books, How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison, and Tips for New Correctional Officers and Their Supervisors, both available through blue360media.com. Link to that is in the description. I know we are moving towards a wider distribution for these two books. I'm looking forward to that. But in the meantime, you got to get the books through Blue 360 Media. And as I mentioned, guys, there's just tons of advice in these books. And I'm working on my leadership book, which is going to have a lot more advice that we haven't really discussed or tapped in on. It's definitely not in these books. So it's going to be a pretty good way to complement the series here. Me and Joe did some good dialogue on some of the tips I have in that book. We did a little bit of that yesterday. And then we had a great discussion towards the end about what we plan to do when we retire. I think that's something that I think me, Joe, and Russ should really sit down and kind of discuss. In my mind, it's more for me getting ready to retire in a couple of years, but they already have. So I think it'll be a great dialogue. And if you guys didn't get a chance, if you go on TikTok, I put about, I think it was like a 7 or 8 minute video on the latter half of that part of the discussion. It's pretty heartfelt. All right, let me get, we got Russ. What's up, Russ?
Hey, how you doing, Anthony?
Good, Russ. Hey, Russ, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Of course I don't. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and now retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections. I have also worked as a senior juvenile correctional officer. I currently work for a private company where we do re-entry and rehabilitation work for a local county jail where I'm a case manager, and for a local county probation department. I am also the founder of Keepers of Chaos, and I am also here as one of the roundtable members, appearing most often on Tier Talk.
Yes, and we love to have have you. Oh, go ahead.
Can I get to one little bit that the gentleman wrote about there, and something that maybe we don't see in adult corrections, but I think what he's talking about is we would line all the kids up and have them have their hands behind their back, not restrained, but they're supposed to keep them there at all costs. And so sometimes when you're moving them from education to medical to the culinary or whatever, they just want to mess around and not keep their hands there and stuff. And so we would be pretty strict, when we were doing that kind of movement, especially if you're working in a co-ed type of facility or whatever. So I think that's what he's referring to. And maybe we can delve into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I definitely misunderstood that. Then it said on securing hands, so I automatically assumed that.
Yeah, that's just my best guess, because that's what we did at the facility that I was at too.
No, I remember you worked at the juvenile and you were changing lives every day.
I don't know about that, but I have a broad experience. Let's put it that way.
All right. Yeah, yes, you do. And we got Joe Pomponio. What's up, Joe?
What's going on, guys? After that intro, now I got images of Russ standing in the hallway with a bunch of juveniles. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Yes. Well, not quite, but sometimes it felt that close.
Hey, Joe, you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, or formerly known as the Texas Department of Corrections. 29 years, 6 months, and 18 days. Currently working as an assistant jail administrator for our local county sheriff's office in the jail division, and a panel member here for Tier Talk.
Yes, I can picture Russ's like motivational speech be about like hokey pokeying and turning yourself around. Everybody, put your left foot in.
That's it.
Maybe on some occasions, but there's still some things that some things that happen there that I would still be reticent to talk about. Juveniles, they're not necessarily, as easy to deal with as some people might think they are.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who worked juvenile who was a sergeant, may have had 11 or 12 years in and wind up having to get pensioned out because of an injury in which the inmate, a juvenile, a very big kid, about 16 years old, maybe almost 300 pounds, hit him with the side of a tray. And then when he fell down, because he didn't hit him with the back, he hit him with the side of the tray, so more impact. And then when he fell down, the inmate got a hold of his arm and stepped on his shoulder at the same time as he pulled the arm up. He's got no movement on that whole. Yeah, it was very crazy injury. He got pensioned out. All right, so real quick, guys, this is going to be a great dialogue, but I do want to filter a little bit of something before we actually go into the dialogue. Is I want to make sure that when we do this dialogue in context, we know what we consider the difference between a serious charge and a charge that may be more of a nuisance charge or a minor charge in which we could employ some discretion. So this will be a little bit very general because obviously you can't cover every type of charge, but I think we can give you enough of a generality in which you can filter that. So I'll go with Russ first and Joe. But again, guys, when we're talking about charges, a lot of this dialogue is going to talk about the discretionary charges that may fall into more of a nuisance or more of a minor thing that really doesn't have a serious consequence on the back end of that if you avoid it or not. Okay, so with that said, Russ, could you just maybe provide us with a quick difference between what a serious charge would be and then more of a nuisance or minor charge?
In CDCR, where I have most of my disciplinary experience, basically you had charges that were broke down into either serious or administrative, right? And so administrative were the lighter weight charges, and then anything that was serious were things that they could, actually, lose time for. And so some of the more serious ones, we would start down probably about the lowest level thing that you would see there was maybe like tattooing, because, tattooing has a health component with it and a gang component with it. And so it's still considered serious, but probably, down on the lower end of it. Administratively, it could be for, horseplay, or it could be for, being too boisterous in class, or for being out of bounds, or for not reporting to work, and all of those type of things. Those things, though, were also leveled in a manner where they could become more serious and could eventually lose them, what they call forfeiture of work time credits for those things. Of course, on the higher end of the scale, we have everything, from murder to gang activity to dealing drugs inside the institution or even out on the street. Some of these guys have access like that. Assault on staff, numerous batteries, being involved in a riot. So there's a spectrum there, and that spectrum covers just pretty much everything that happens in the outside world as well. And so that's how we deal with it, is through the disciplinary process, which also encompasses a lot of times, referrals to the district attorney, et cetera.
Yeah, now for me, mine is not going to be all encompassing here, but how I would look at something is a more serious charge could be the violation of the rights of someone else, so an assault, like Russ said, or the potential to lead to that. So gambling, a chance where there's a transfer of payment. So like even a tattoo or some commissary exchanges, sports betting, stuff like that. Fraudulent acts, I think, that are documented, so inmates making false claims, like Priya would be one where I feel that once the investigation has found that the inmate allegation is unfounded, that means it is an outright lie, they should be held accountable for that. And I guess for more nuisance things, in-house management stuff, like, not eating in the day room, not like Russ said, not reporting to a program or a job, maybe being a little bit annoying in class, stuff, or maybe not a threat, but maybe a disrespect between staff and inmate, where it's not a threat, but there's a level of disrespect. And again, for the nuisance, it's not something where I feel if it was left unaddressed, it would pose a serious threat to the facility or someone in the facility, whatever it is. But for a serious charge, it's not just what you deal with in the moment. It could be a charge that if you don't address it, it could lead to a serious threat. And again, that's what's under the surface. I don't really care what an inmate tells me their intent is. What I care about is what that could develop into if that is not being addressed. So I want people to realize that when you write charges, the charges don't solely serve as a punitive measure. It also serves as an effort to prevent, because that would get me an inmate from one area into another so they can be better maintained. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? Nuisance and serious charges?
Yeah, I mean, for me, serious charges, to me are any actions that require immediate, action to prevent any kind of, health, security, safety violations, to which, action is pretty much needed immediately. Most of your nuisance charges are going to be ones that aren't so time sensitive, something that can be remedied in the short future. Or something that repeated attempts of any kind of resolution has failed, but doesn't pose an immediate threat to anybody's personal safety, health, or any kind of safety code violations.
Yeah, and I wanted to get that first one out of the way because I think that's the obvious. I wanted to make sure that when people watch the dialogue, people note that we're not forgiving or utilizing discretion for all types of charges. It's the ones that are more nuisance or more minor. So again, that kind of hits the first part. So if you're getting ready to write a charge, you have to note the seriousness of that charge. And just in general, one of the concerns that we mentioned was the immediate violation of human rights, or what it could lead to if it wasn't addressed. So I think that's a good opener. So I just wanted to get that out of the way so we can move forward with the other 6 tips. But definitely the first thing you want to ask yourself is the seriousness of the charge. So with that said, the reason why you want to ask yourself the seriousness of the charge is because when you write a charge, let's not forget, because I think what people tend to forget is they get so focused on the outcome of a charge that they don't realize that outside of accountability, because that's your job to hold inmates accountable, charges are a documented effort when it comes to documenting the inmate's behavior. If it comes to when you're documenting for assistance, some of the smaller level charges will require a supervisor's review. So that means that's bringing the supervisor into the area to help you now address a concern that, even if it's minor, maybe it could be repetitive in nature to the point where it's just you got to do a little bit more now than just trying to address it verbally. It also documents your interaction with the inmate, which is great. That's always good to have, because that interaction is an effort to be a corrective measure. Because let's be honest, I mean, if I'm writing up a small charge, I may not initially write it up for punitive reasons. My initial intent may be, let me see if I can correct the behavior, and a documented charge can also support needed alerts. So let's go with Joe first and Russ. There's 4 things here, Joe. And again, now we're going to be talking more about the discretionary aspect of dealing with charges that are more minor or maybe more nuisance. So we already know that there is no discretion for those seriousness charges, the ones that have a higher level of threat to them. So we're going to now focus on the charges that deal with just management or in-house management. So, Joe, documenting the inmate's behavior, documenting a call for assistance, documenting your interaction with the inmate, documenting charges that can support needed alerts. I mean, this is basically saying that a reason to write the charge is to make sure that at this point you're documenting it. So why would I look to document it?
Well, I mean, because number one, you're trying to promote a positive change in the offender's behavior. Secondly, let's face it, all incoming inmates don't read the rule books. Very few actually take the time to read the rule books. Of course, ignorance of the rule book isn't a defense for the charge. But, when it comes down to it, you got to ask yourself, I don't know how it is there. But here, we actually have, when it comes to writing a charge, you can actually physically write the charge on the paper, and you can turn it in, document it as an informal resolution, which means it doesn't go any further in the disciplinary proceeding, but it does get placed in the inmate's file and on record, so that if future attempts, or future failures or violations occur of that same nature, they can look to see, okay, well, this has been informally resolved at one point. Now this is a second or third violation of the same. So, let's go ahead with the disciplinary, and you got to think about, the cost of what it costs to actually run a disciplinary, regardless if it's minor or major. Believe it or not, in Texas, it does have a cost, because it costs time, it costs paper, it costs, man hours for both the disciplinary hearing officer and the counsel substitute. There's a lot of things involved other than just, putting a charge on a piece of paper and sending it forward. So, you have to ask yourself, before you write the charge, how serious is this? Is this something that I can take care of verbally? Have I attempted to take care of this verbally before I write this charge? And it does document a pattern of, later on down the road, it'll document the inmate's behavior. There's been some times where, a supervisor's been called to an area or just happened to be passing by, and an officer would tell me, hey, Lou, look, come down here with me for a second. This guy refuses to take his damn cover off of his light. So, I go down there and tell the convict to, take the cover off his light. Of course, he's going to comply. He'll give me the cover, and it's done. The officer still has the ultimate authority because he gained compliance for his request. And, I was just there as a support role, and, later on in the process, let's say this guy's a repetitive violator, for nuisance things, that all is documented on a record. So, not just me, but other supervisors, other sergeants, other lieutenants, other captains can see that this guy's a chronic violator. So, it does document a pattern of behavior, but, you need to honestly give it some good thought, and it'll give you the compliance that you need ultimately. But, the question is, does it give you the respect factor if you just go directly into a disciplinary without trying to informally resolve it verbally first?
Yeah, and I want to add something, Joe, that you mentioned. So when it comes to ignorance of the rules, a lot of inmates will claim that, but that's why during your orientation process or level of intake, you're giving them a book or you're giving them the rules, at somewhere along the line, whether they sign that they received it or not, you are going to document your effort that you gave it to them. And I want them to read it, don't get me wrong, but if they don't, that's on them. So at that point, if I go to charge them and the person said, hey, they didn't know about the rules, all I have to show is my effort to provide them the rules. I don't have to be there to, make sure that they read them. And if they have any questions about it, of course, they can ask me. But with that said, that pretty much holds a lot of weight. And I also want to mention there are some rules that may not be in the book, but are established in that, let's say, the housing unit or in that unit, whatever that may be.
SOP.
Yeah, like the SOP specific for that unit or specific for that program. So you do have charges that are minor, but it could be just a generalized charge that's failure to comply with a written rule or regulation of that program or failure to comply with a written rule or regulation of that unit. Those are literally stuff that's written within the unit or written within the program that you still have to document somewhere along the line that you provided that inmate with that. Because if you can't prove that documentation that you provided to them, that ignorance may carry weight if you have a hearing officer who unfortunately sides or their bias may not be in relationship to the facility's needs, but more in the relationship of the inmate's wants. All right. What's your thoughts on all this, Russ?
Well, I think that, you just have to have good judgment. And, it also comes down to, knowing what your abilities are. For me, I was always one that, pretty much, if it wasn't a felony, or if it wasn't at least a very, very, serious charge, I would find other ways to deal with it, because I always felt, and this might be a little bit of hubris or whatever, I always felt that, anything that was, down there on the low level, on the administrative level, was keeping me from getting to the more serious things. I guess that's for someone else to judge. But that's pretty much the way that I looked at it. That was my overarching philosophy on the charges that I was going to chase and the type of, work that I was putting in, to try and, keep discipline at its finest. Because I was always looking, tamp down on weapons, tamp down on gang activity, tamp down on violence, tamp down on riots or whatever. There is another philosophy, kind of the broken windows philosophy, though, where it's like, you chase everything. It doesn't mean you necessarily write charges on it all, but you at least try and address it in a way that forces inmates to have to deal with their behavior, however minor, in a way that brings them into compliance. And if you can get a high level of compliance, you're doing a good job, obviously. That tends to break down, once we get past maybe some of the very, minimum type of inmates. Even when we get to like just the mediums and stuff, they're very recalcitrant. They're very, antisocial oriented. And so, you just kind of sometimes really have to, throw everything that you can at them. And it's just kind of dependent on that. I think, though, if you're, a full size and weight officer and you've got lots of experience, though, most things you can deal with in a more discretionary manner.
Yes. And I'm going to tell you guys something right now. The documentation truly does hold a lot of weight because it documents effort. I mean, that's the key. It documents your effort to address a concern that at that point may need to be addressed. I mean, I think the biggest concern here is when you have those patterns of constant minor rule violations. Sorry about that, Russ.
Yeah, and ignore him. He's killing somebody. So, well, I was going to say on that, one really great thing, though, about that documentation is when you do write the charges is, you can turn infractions into misdemeanors into felonies, so to speak, just loosely saying that, it's all about, progressive discipline. And I've seen inmates go, what? When they thought, hey, this is the, fifth time that you've been written up for being out of bounds or stealing something out of the kitchen. And suddenly, it went from an administrative hearing into a serious charge. And now they're looking at losing 30 days forfeiture of work time credits. And how great is that? All of a sudden, they thought there was no teeth to the law, no teeth to the process, and they found out different.
Yeah, and guys, like Russ said, when you start seeing the same behavior constantly being violated, just the minor or the nuisance, and you do write it up, it is progressive discipline to the point where if you could document the constant violation of a minor rule, and it goes to a higher level, being able to manage that inmate's behavior, that could turn into a major charge. So, it does matter when the documentation does. But again, and we'll get to it later because we've done shows, and I don't want people to think that this show was in the opposite of what we covered before. We're just telling you what should trigger to write up an inmate. Do we believe in writing up an inmate for every little thing? No. And we'll get to that. But again, the topic is, what would trigger someone or staff to write up an inmate? So we're giving you, some of the triggers, at least for us. This is an easy one. I'll go first with this, then we'll go to Russ, then we'll go to Joe. Establishes effective boundaries for inmates' behavior. As a rookie, we tell people you got to write up everything. And I think the reason why you're writing things up is to establish and document effective boundaries. Also, if you are writing up those minor charges at the very beginning of your career, and again, this is sort of what you do when you're a rookie because you're kind of in reactionary mode, the minor charges still may have to be overseen by your direct supervisor to kind of keep things somewhat objective. So it does bring the supervisor on scene a little bit more to kind of see what you're doing, help you navigate the process. But the establishing of the effective boundaries matter because I think inmates, especially when you're new, they are going to try foolish things. And I think those documented efforts matter when at the very beginning of your career because it's just a reminder that you're willing to do your job, that you're willing to chase conflict, that you're willing to say no when you need to say no. Now, obviously, you'll get discretion as you move forward. But with that said, at the very beginning, it's great for you to establish those boundaries. And also, what's good about this also is if I have a problem with Russ and I start writing up Russ, eventually the other inmates will also start to see what it is I tolerate, what it is I don't what it is I tolerate, what it is I don't tolerate, and they'll start adjusting their behavior. So eventually you start to get that higher level expectation through your immediate management of that one inmate. And that's just one more thing that matters. How I address an inmate, especially at the very beginning of my career, will open up that Pandora's box either way. So having said that, there could be a chance that if I'm starting and I'm relatively new and Russ does something a little foolish, I may want to write him, not just because I want to address the behavior, but I want people to know, the other inmates to know, hey, this is what I'm about right now. So Russ, that first inmate that does that kind of becomes the scapegoat for the higher level understanding of what it is that I'm willing to tolerate and not tolerate. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, sometimes it pays to make an example out of people. And that's one of the things that as you get into this process, it's good not just to chase the charge and in order to establish yourself and define the boundaries and show where the lines are crossed, but also to get, that experience to understand, what happens in that disciplinary process. When you're out there and you're writing the paper and then, you never hear about it again. There's some times where people might be dropping the ball. That's why I always encourage people to follow through on the process and learn what happens. Find out why weren't you called as a witness if this guy, was not going to, plead guilty or whatever in it, and follow through and learn that process because that does a few things. It makes you more effective at report writing, which is key to this whole thing. It makes you understand, where there might be some flaws in the system that you can address through your report writing and through the way that, you handle the inmates and the things that pop up during that. So it's all part of the learning process. It's part of the learning curve. It's part of what gives you your authority. I mean, just look at what happens with, street level cops, when they write an infraction for parking, or they write, a ticket for speeding or for drunk driving or whatever it is. Those guys tend to want to get in there and learn the process to figure out where their weaknesses are so that they can counter them and mitigate them and become better at what they do. I think that's one of the things that, I was really blessed with at one point, where I was the disciplinary officer for a whole unit that we had, 1,100 and something inmates. And so every disciplinary report ran through me. And so I was having to coordinate with the lieutenant, and I was having to, sometimes, work as what we call the staff assistant. If an inmate, couldn't, get his own evidence, or if he was illiterate or things like that. And so I had to function in that arena, and I became very adept at learning what it took to make sure that you got that guilty verdict in there. And so I think that being part of that process and going through it and figuring out what's working and what's not working and which phraseology is best, and talking to, whoever's in charge of the hearings themselves, makes you a better officer overall, and in ways that are going to serve you really well down the line. So that's my 2 cents worth on that.
Hey, Russ, I love what you're saying. I want to ask you another question, because I love what you're saying, but I think there's something else that you may want to add in, because I don't want you to skip over it, because there's a lot of cool things of what you just said. But I wanted to ask you something. When it comes to establishing the boundaries, I love the fact that you mentioned the trial and error, right? So the trial and error, we kind of mentioned, it's for basically the inmates to understand what those boundaries are, right? But if you, as a rookie, when you're starting to develop discretion through your experience, what are you looking for inwards? So you know that you can move past the trial and error and finally solidify some of the practices.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe, and because I think that every individual is different. For me, I was just going through these phases. I was trying different things. I was trying to understand how the process worked. I was trying to understand policy, procedures, state law, case law, federal law, and learn the ins and outs and all the nuances in what goes on. I don't think that there's any specific thing that I can point to that would help a person other than just getting every bit of experience that you can. In everything that I did, I was always cognizant of the fact of the things that I had to do, like with regards to evidence, and and how to process that, and what reports had to be written, and whether or not there were confidential memorandums that needed to accompany some of the things that were going on with some of the trials and hearings, rather, that we were conducting. So I'm not sure that I have a really good answer for that. I can just say that being in there and just getting your feet wet and learning all the nuances and things will make you better. And I don't know that there's any one formula that I can point to.
No, but I think you answered it really well. I think it also, when you're coming in as a rookie, right, you got to figure that these inmates know the system a lot better than you, because they're always trying to go around it. So you can't go around it without knowing it. So I think what's great about what you just said is, when at the very beginning, when you're chasing it, it does speed the process of you learning, how to apply the policies and procedures that you've learned. And I think one of the things I would like to mention in answering that question is also when it comes to the nuisance, when it comes to the minor stuff. And again, when you're starting to gain experience and being able to utilize discretion, so a little further into your career, I look at long-term applicability. If I'm chasing after every charge, especially as a senior officer, the short term of it could be more of the win-loss. I'm chasing for a win, or maybe just, hey, you pissed me off and I'm going to retaliate. I don't want to do that game for 25 years. If I'm going to write something that's a minor rule infraction, it's because at one point my efforts to address it are not working. So the long-term solution is going to be connected to the minor charge. I never write a minor charge now with my level of experience that doesn't have a long-term plan to it, if that's what I mean. If it's just short-term because either it's more convenient to write the inmate up than to address it, or if it's just, this guy's pissing me off and I'm going to come after him today. I'm not playing that game anymore after 20-something years in the business. But I think what you said was spot on, Russ. It was never been discussed before. I think what you said about, no, it helps you establish the rules and the policies and the procedures. It does move you through it a little bit quicker because it takes you from the book to right here. Let's apply it. Let's see how it works. I think that was an excellent answer. What's your thought on all this, Joe, with the establishment of the boundaries and maybe some of the stuff that Russ said?
Well, coming in as a rookie officer, it's important to establish your boundaries. It's important to go ahead and draw that line in the sand for the offender population to know that, you're here, you're going to enforce the rules and regulations by any means necessary. And I did the same thing too. When I came in, we were taught by the academy, if you see infractions, document them, write them. It's the only way you're going to gain respect, that kind of crap. And, when I first came in, I did write disciplinaries. I wasn't the kind of officer that wrote undercover disciplinaries. I would let the inmate know, hey, I'm writing you a case. That, in itself kind of ups your respect factor amongst the offender population a little bit because of the fact that, you're man or woman enough to let them know ahead of time instead of, sending out secret indictments. As you grow in your experience, you'll find out that, using your verbal judo, you can alleviate a lot of the nuisance stuff, nuisance charges later on down the line, just by, using your verbal judo. But it's ultimately, it's important for rookie officers to get themselves established. And, the offender population pretty much already knows that when a new officer comes in, what time it is. They already know they're going to get smoked for everything until, the rookie officer finds their way. And the offender population knows that line in the sand is drawn. And like I said, as you grow, you find out that a lot of your verbal judo alleviates, a lot of the documentary, levying charges on every little thing. Now, that's not to say that, if they keep doing it, by all means, document it and write the charge.
Yeah, and now, guys, I think this was a great suggestion. I think this was Russ, where a charge can be the only effective recourse to establish your authority. But I also want to mention charges may not help you maintain your authority. So this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys related to this bullet here. So I'll start with Russ because Russ did bring up the thought on this one, and then the next one I'll start with Joe because that's the one that Joe brought up. But Russ, I want to ask you when you do your answer, if you could you definitely talk a little bit about, in my opinion, whether you agree with me or not, I don't know, but when we tell rookies to write up inmates at the very beginning, even for the small things, it's because we're helping them get an effort, provide them with an effort to establish their authority because they can lean on the rules. They can lean on, the help from the supervisor just to kind of give them a momentum. But having said that, we always tell people it's not a pattern you want to kind of keep with because eventually you got to become your own person and you got to address issues. Try to not write what you don't have to write and start really trying to address it and manage the unit. So I think there's a big difference when you use a charge to establish your authority, or maybe in some cases regain your authority, because that could happen. But it should never be used to maintain your authority. Does that make sense, Russ?
Okay, so let me take you through what my thinking process is on this. So first of all, I'm me with X number of years of experience, and I've worked hard to establish myself and do all these things in and around the inmate population. And so having done that, there are a large number of things that I can do that no rookie could, and maybe nobody with 1 year or 2 years or maybe even 5 years could do. And I couldn't necessarily explain to them, at least not briefly, why the things that I do works. They would come in and do the exact same thing and meet with complete defeat over it. So you have to really have gone through enough training and enough experience and enough blood, sweat, and tears in order to be seasoned enough to be able to pull off some things in order to not have to write inmates necessarily. But there is also a point that you can get to, no matter who you are, where none of those things are working any longer. It might be that you just have some specific individuals who are really recalcitrant and really set in their ways. They're really antisocial criminal personality types, and so you can't get through to them. When that happens, they have in a fashion taken away your discretionary decision making. So now we have to go back to using the paper because we have to establish a trail. That trail has to lead back to where we started, the documentation, and we have to start finding a way to put the screws to them and to finally rein them back in, whatever that takes, right? And so this is a failure on your part to be able to do it, without paperwork. But don't take that failure personally. Just take it as, hey, this is one of those cases where that's the way it just has to be. Sometimes this is kind of a thing too, where it may not just be one or two recalcitrant individuals. It's just, a whole bunch of guys that are, all living together, in cell blocks or dorms or whatever. And so they're just off the rails. And so you're having to spend a lot of time focusing on them. And so instead, you're just going to go in and you're just going to do the shotgun effect and just start writing them all up and see what breaks and figure out, hey, who's going to start coming to their senses first? Because eventually that's going to impact them, with regards to everything from, recreation. Hey, you know what? I'm still taking IDs here because you guys weren't quiet, or you were all out of bounds, or you weren't listening to me. And so I guess that you're not going to get out onto the recreation field for the next 2 hours while I go through this. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack, but you just have to understand that if you're willing to get in there and dig and figure it out and learn and figure out how to push people's buttons when necessary, and then go back to the report writing when your discretionary decision making has left you high and dry, and kind of use everything at your disposal to rein things back in. And so that's the best I can say about that.
No, you know what you said that was good about that, Russ, is you mentioned something. The discretionary effort, even as much we want to say it's up to the officer at that point to employ when they're ready, it really is based on how the inmate responds.
Yeah.
So who really has more control of that discretionary effort over that minor rule infraction? Is it the inmate or is it the officer?
Yeah, and that's, there's the inmate population as a whole. When you're dealing with them, you have to reach some sort of detente. There has to be some sort of balance. If they're completely and always out of pocket and just, off the rails, and there's nothing that you can do, it could be them, it could be the population, or it could be you, and you're not being effective. There's times where, maybe that's true. Just an officer doesn't have quite what it takes. Maybe some officer does. But it could be just a really ineffective officer, or an officer not trained well enough, or an officer that, just doesn't have the level of experience. And this is why it pays off. It pays off to put yourself in uncomfortable situations so that you can, under stress, learn to grow and learn to cope with the inmate population as a whole. And so it just really, it pays to do those things. And I'm not kidding. If your hand is always raised and you're always willing to be the first one in there to deal with a bad situation, whatever it is, you'll become better and more adept at everything you do in corrections.
I love that. And I like what Russ said. I mean, it's an agreement. And I mean, how many times are you going to allow that agreement to be violated? I got these expectations. You tell me you agree to them, and then you just keep on violating those agreements. And I'm using the word agreement, but you know what I mean. What's your thoughts on this, Joe, with it being the only effective recourse? And also, I would love to get your thoughts on, the charge being used to establish or regain, but I don't think they're used to maintain.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, depending on the seriousness of the violation, a written disciplinary is going to be your only recourse. Possession of alcohol, possession of drugs, fighting with serious bodily injury, a whole multitude of charges that, it's going to be automatic disciplinary off the bat. When it comes to the more nuisance stuff, does continuation of writing cases help maintain your authority? No. As you grow as a rookie officer, you're going to find tips and tricks. I found that, writing infractions for every little thing not only made my damn hand hurt, but it took away my respect factor from the offender population because, I could be using my verbal judo. Later on down the line, there's always tips and tricks and ways to gain your compliance. For example, inmate, our inmates are required to have their cells clean, be properly dressed, have their ID card on their person, have their beds made and trash empty before they leave their cell for any reason whatsoever. And, you've already told this offender twice to clean his cell up and to make his bed. And, here it comes recreation time and phone time's coming up, and he still hasn't done what you told him to do. So you walk by the cell and you let him know, I guess you're going to forfeit your rec and you're going to forfeit your phone time because of the fact that you didn't do what I told you to do, not once, but twice. And ultimately, later on down the road, the guys are going to know that, hey, this dude ain't playing. He means business. I lost phone time talking to baby mama, or talking to my family. I lost time out there on the rec yard because, I wanted to nut up and not do what I was told to do. And this dude ain't playing. There's always tips and tricks and ways to navigate around things. The continuation of charges doesn't always, maintain an authority, but you can find ways to navigate around it and still gain compliance and, get the point across, hey, this officer here ain't the one, and of course, they try to raise a little bit of hell. I'm all kinds of bitches and hoes and this, that, and the other. And, I may be, but guess what? When I go on break, I'm going to get to use my telephone. Can you hear me now? You know what I mean? And you throw it right back in their lap and let them know you're going to do what I tell you to do, or there's going to be a repercussion of some sort. I may not write you a disciplinary for it, but I'm going to hit you where it hurts. I'm going to forfeit your rec. I'm going to forfeit your phone time because you can't follow basic commands. You can't follow basic instructions.
And I want to add something to this too, guys. Once you make the effort to correct the inmate's behavior and they keep on refusing not to, and then you finally make the decision to write them up, I don't care what they do afterwards, stick to your decision. Let's just put that out there right now too. Stick to your decision, because a lot of them, they'll test you, and then when they see you go to write it, hey man, I'm sorry, man, I'm good. I'm going to go through with it now, because it's still the process. You got to keep that momentum going, because they'll play it out as far as they can go, and they'll give it that last attempt, and that's when you have to prove that your effort was not a bluff. Because I think this matters too, because I think I got this from John Maxwell, but what you say and your behaviors have to be in sync, right? So if you say something and your behaviors don't match, it doesn't underline your statement. It actually crosses it out. This is John Maxwell. But if you say something and then your behaviors match, it underlines it. And this is it. So once you start going through that process and the person's not listening, and then you say, you know what, I'm good, we're going to go ahead and write this, you write it. Because the moment that inmate gets you to shift in the process of you already making the decision to write it, everything's been crossed out. Your behaviors and your talk no longer matches. And I believe at that point, the inmate does get the win on that. I'm not saying you're chasing win-loss, but the inmate is. Let's not lie. You're doing what's right. The inmate wants the win. So with that said, if you're making the effort to change the behavior and the inmate's choosing not to comply, and then finally they do when you decide to write it up, you can't shift, because that inmate will automatically think once you do the shift, they'll go back thinking they got the win, and this is how far they can go with you, without you doing anything. It kind of stretches you a little too far. This is something that Joe brought up first, and I love this, something I didn't think of right off the bat, but it kind of falls into documentation, but I felt we could do it a little bit separate on its own, but ensures proper classification when it comes to inmate management. So Joe, what do you mean by this?
So your classification, classification is used for a variety of functions in a penitentiary. We classify inmates when they first get to the facility. We're going to classify, their house and job by their health status, by their disciplinary history from a county jail or other facility, by the seriousness of their act in which they're incarcerated. We also use the classification process to look at offenders' line, class, and custody upgrade or downgrade due to disciplinary histories. Like in Texas, when you have a major disciplinary infraction and you go through major disciplinary hearing, you're sent to classification to be looked at to see if we need to downgrade your custody, upgrade your custody, or whatever the case may be. Classification is a good tool, and classification relies on the disciplinary history of an offender, due to the fact that we're either looking to upgrade this offender's custody and put him in a less restrictive environment, or we're looking to downgrade this offender and put him in a more restrictive environment. Got an inmate that's living in the cell blocks, and we're looking at him to put him in a dorm only environment or a dorm environment, which has a little more freedom than a cell block environment, because you pretty much can move around at your whim. But when we look at the disciplinary history during a classification hearing, we can look at this inmate's disciplinary hearing or history and go, well, this dude's a chronic masturbator. He doesn't clean his cell. He's a chronic masturbator on staff. Hell no, we're not putting him in the dorm only environment. We're not going to reward him for his violations. So, having a clearly documented history, because classification chiefs and classification people that work in that department don't always know these offenders as well as the line staff does that works the floor every day. The only time classification sees these offenders most of the time is either when they're first coming in to get their inmate orientation, or as a result of a disciplinary hearing. So having a clearly documented history in his disciplinary history helps the classification chiefs, or whoever's running the classification team that day, makes them aware of what kind of offender this guy is. So they can look in their history and know right off the bat what kind of, well, this dude's a chronic rule violator. So we're he just received a major disciplinary for sexual misconduct, and he's got 4 previous convictions, plus he's got 3 convictions for failure to follow rules and regulations. So that gives us a determination whether we're going to upgrade or downgrade this guy's custody. And having a clearly documented disciplinary history helps with that, because like I said, that these classification chiefs don't always know these offenders unless it's a name that comes across their desk over and over and over, or they see him in the classification history due to disciplinary hearings over and over and over.
Joe, I want to add on that, because that's makes great sense. So there could be some inmates that are problematic with their behaviors. but people may look at the consequences of, let's say, the refusals. And they may say, well, they're only refusing this, and therefore they may not think they need to write the person up because the refusal itself may be for something that's rather minor, that may not require all this extra effort. But now if you have an inmate that's looking to move forward and get into those dorm settings, now those refusals do matter because that's their effort to comply. So now, having said that, you start documenting those efforts, because the last thing I want, to be honest with you, is an inmate in an open dorm that likes to refuse or likes to disobey direct orders. At this point, I really don't care what they're disobeying. I don't really care what they're refusing. My bigger concern is you're not showing the respect to the officer. So if someone says, well, you know what, they're only refusing this minor thing. Okay, well, that's like their 10th one. What I don't like is that refusal kind of minimizes the officer's authority. Now, when I have that officer that's overseeing a full min unit, they don't really have time to kind of be focused on this one individual who could wind up disrupting the whole unit or bringing the inmates together. So one of the things I love to look for when it comes to these dorm settings are those smaller refusal charges. You know, and what are they refusing? Yeah, I don't know, but there's 10 of them. There's 10 of them. And these refusals are done face-to-face with the officer, showboating in front of the other inmates, or just plain out disrespect. And some people might say, well, I dropped the charge because, you know, it was really just a personality conflict. Yeah, I don't want that in my dorms either. I don't want personality conflicts with my officers in the dorm. To be honest with you, the officers that run the dorms, these are officers that know how to jail. I mean, for the most part, they do. They know how to deal with the inmate population. They do know how to deal with them in like a isolated fashion to control any effort to, branch the concern that could wind up causing the unit to disrupt. So having said that, that's a very good point, because that may be a good reason. Like if I find out this inmate could be heading to an open dorm setting and this inmate's just constantly disobeying, maybe nothing major, but the fact that their behavior of them disobeying could be a problem. I may want to document those efforts because that person behavior may not make them ready to be in an open dorm. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? Because that's a good point, I thought.
Yeah. And, also, when you're writing these type of things, the more information that you can include can be very helpful to the classification process, because, these guys come in, they're not necessarily, they don't have necessarily a lot of crap in their jacket, so to speak. And so you're just looking at, what they were charged with, what the jury, found, or what the court found. And so you're just kind of like, well, we don't have anything, but his charge to decide what his classification points are, So then they come in and, they have to fill out all of the stuff that goes along with that. And there's points, at least in California, assessed on whether the person is married and whether this is their first offense, and whether or not, they have a history of, let's say, escape or whatever. And so there may not be a lot of meat on the bone to start with, but we can start fleshing that out. Problematic inmates, sometimes I would write the weren't even disciplinary charge, but just what we call informational chronos. Which is actually, a part of the disciplinary process, but there's no appeal rights, and there's, no actual negativity that goes along with them, except for the paper trail that it leads. And it was a great way, I would have, problems with a guy because of, of his gang connections or something. And, I didn't think I could make the gang charge stick, but I can sure put down that, hey, he just had, a brand new, tattoo, put on his hand or whatever it was, that tends to make you think, hey, he's in this gang or the other gang or whatever. And it starts to tell a story. It starts to reveal a narrative, and it starts to, print out and pattern out what this individual is about. And that can be very helpful from a standpoint of classification and possibly from a standpoint of, intelligence gathering.
And that's a good point too, intelligence in regards to their behavior. We have two more, but let me just put this superficial one in before we do the two more. This is just to have in the back of your mind, whether I agree with it or not. It does exist. When you write smaller level charge, the nuisance charges, let's say you're that officer that just likes to write everything up. This is superficial, but it matters. There may be no more room in lockup. And so what happens here is you constantly writing these smaller charges up, and you're going to wind up pushing inmates that have the stronger charges out because there's just not enough room. So they wind up pushing the inmates out who have the least amount of time left. It doesn't go necessarily by what their charge is. In some cases, it can go by, well, they only got a month left, when these are the inmates that we really want them to complete their time. So again, it depends on what the sanction is. The sanction could be an in-house management, whether it's extra duty, the taking away of something. But in some cases, if you have a repetitive minor rule violation and it mounts up, like Russ said, it could go into a major charge because of the pattern of it being repeated. Now, technically, you got this minor charge going into a lockup area, and if you have no room, someone's going to have to be taken out. Again, I just wanted to put it out there. That may not be the case everywhere, but I think it's just, if we're going to cover a topic, we got to try to cover every perspective. That could be a perspective you want to take into account, because management definitely is going to look at their room and lockup, and they may make a decision. I know this guy's annoying, but maybe what we could do is mess with their lifestyle, move them around a little bit or whatever it is. But that charge right now is only going to hurt us. So maybe we could just take their TV or take the inmate and move them to another unit. Basically alleviate some level of comfortability they may have. I just wanted to get that out there. I didn't want to get that one.
That does happen a lot more often than people think. And I've been in that position where I've had to tell an officer, the officer called me and said, hey, this guy just threatened me through his cell door. And, I got 6 pre-investigations locked up. I got 5 in there for assaults, and it's one of those things where, you have to sit the officer down and say, look, I know this dude's a shithead. He pisses me off on a good day too. But I got nowhere to put this guy. My suggestion is, as long as he's not trying to chunk on you through his door, write the charge, let's get it through the major disciplinary hearing, and we'll move him to another unit at that time. It sucks having to do that, to say that to an officer, because you want to support what they do. You really do. But there comes a time where, it comes and goes in cycles. Your lockups are either empty or you're overflowing or plumb ass full, and you got nowhere to put these guys, and, I had to tell an officer, hey, like I said, I know this guy's a shithead, but leave him in his house. Make sure, you let the picket officer know that his door doesn't get popped for any reason. He doesn't come out for rec. He doesn't come out for telephone. He doesn't come out. And when it's time for him to shower, that, a supervisor must be present when he's brought out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've done that. I've seen it before too. Dorms are different. Obviously, you're going to get to that inmate immediately. But if you're in an area where the inmate could be locked in, you could lock them in until there's a chance to kind of see what needs to be done. So like a lock in place. I'm not a real big fan of an officer being threatened behind a door and then calling a code. And it's like, well, we'll wait, or spraying them when it's like, hey, wait, what was the threat? Was it verbal? Yes. And they were secured in a cell door? Yes. That may be a concern, because someone's going to look at it and say, what type of threat did they actually pose at that time, the immediate threat? I mean, So I love what you're saying, because that's a good thing to mention. But again, if you gave me a call and said, hey, inmate threatened me, and you're in a dorm, I'm going to 100%. But if I got a guy that I can lock in for a cell just for a second so I can figure it out, I will. I just want to make sure that we make all efforts, like you mentioned, to protect the officer's concern, of course, but also make sure that in the process, if we're handling something, we don't negate the other security threats for something that may not be a priority in the moment, but could be. It could be. But let me just handle this. I think sometimes, guys, that's another good thought too. We do have a higher level of accountability to the house, a higher level of accountability to each other. Sometimes what we see as a priority, because it affects us, we have to truly ask ourselves in our effort to address this, will it affect the safety and security somewhere else? And at this point here, I just want to make sure that we're kind of keeping the house balanced, because I have seen, unfortunately, just in general, or even read about it through emails, people that just, they fire start, they rally up the inmates, and then basically they wind up having a whole mess of inmates that just don't like how they manage the unit. And now, it's either do I correct the inmates or do I need to correct the officer? Like, which way do I need to go? Because no matter where I put this officer seems to be the problem. So with that said, I could keep correcting the inmates, but at this point, I think I need to take the officer aside and talk to them, because the officer at this point could be the concern. And we have it, guys. I mean, I'm sure we're all familiar with those type of staff. I'm not saying it's a majority of us. It's a small percentage, but they exist. All right, Russ, I like this because a lot of people tend not to want to write up the charges that when it's needed, because they chase the outcome as opposed to what we just mentioned, the effort behind it, the reason for the effort behind it. But let's not forget, guys, charges provide the inmate with accountability for their actions. So when you feel there's a need at a point for this inmate to be held accountable, and that's a long-term vision, hold the inmate accountable. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, that's part of, why we make the whole paper trail. That's why we, put it in a fashion where, we're not blind from day one that we meet the inmate all the way back and not know what he did to get himself here, the problems that he's presented in the past. These are all things that we want to know. We want to be able to understand the inmate in a way that allows us to maybe mitigate the harm that he might do. If every inmate was just a blank slate, we would just be in a position where we would have to, figure it out as we went from that point forward. So making an inmate accountable for his actions is just the path that he's chosen to stay on all the way along. He's free at any point to divest himself from his past and have that clean slate moving forward. But we're not stupid enough to believe that most inmates are actually going to do that. That's why we write these things. That's why we tell inmates, hey, you know what? I guess you're going to be reading about this real soon. And it puts them in a position where hopefully they'll at least mitigate some of their behavior. Maybe not all of it, maybe a portion of it, maybe none of it at all. There are some hard-head inmates out there that, the more things that you hit them with, the harder that they hit back. So that's kind of where it's at. But there has to be some accountability there. There has to be a way to make them toe the final line, whatever that gets to, And there's times and places where, we truly, just end up having to leave the disciplinary approach, the write-ups and so forth, for things that are, a lot more stern with regards to, this inmate can end up being put in a position where, hey, now we're going to have to use force. Hey, now we're going to have to, send this to outside agency for outside charges or whatever the case may be. So it's all part of the path, and like I say, that inmate can choose to get on or off that path at any point. And that's just part of, what accountability means.
Yeah. And guys, when it comes to the minor charges, the sanctions are usually minor. They could be loss of recreation up to a limited amount of time, usually co-signed by a supervisor, loss of TV, loss of radio, verbal reprimand, maybe some extra hours of duty on a smaller scale, because then you have the higher sanctions that could fall into, let's say a loss of rec is 4 hours for a minor charge. Well, anything above 4 has to be approved for disciplinary. But with that said, it depends on how every facility runs. They run differently, or every agency runs, they run differently. But the sanctions matter. That's where the accountability is. So I want you guys to be wary of this one thing, and it matters. If I'm going to really get to this point where I got to hold this inmate accountable, I got to write the charge, but I also have to give a sanction that doesn't make it easy for them to do. If I got an inmate, now this is in-house management, that never leaves their cell, why am I going to give them 4 hours lock in a cell? That's foolish. The inmate never leaves their cell. Why am I going to write them for that? Or if I got an inmate that loves to come out and work, wants to get out of their cell and work, why am I going to give them 4 hours extra duty? It's not adverse to what they're usually doing. So you really do have to get to know who the inmate is, or what kind of sanction will prove your point. The last thing you want to do is keep on providing the inmate with a sanction that motivates the negative behavior. I mean, I know people may do that catch-all. It's like, well, I don't want to be bothered by this inmate, so I'm going to lock him in for the cell 4 hours. The inmate pretty much locks themselves in all day. You're not really doing a sanction. Like, get that inmate out and get that inmate to work. I know a lot of people too, sad to say, is managing the sanction matters too. If you have an inmate that, it's like, I'm going to write the inmate up and I just want to, lock them in their cell because that gets them out of my sight. Well, the inmate may want that. I think what you do is you give the inmate the extra duty and then you supervise that extra duty a little bit, that you got it, and practice your authority on that inmate to start getting that inmate to see that you're not joking around. And we're not talking about blocks. We're not talking about 45 minutes here and 30 minutes there. In the course of a month, they knock out 4 hours. We're talking about whatever that amount is straight through. I think for a minor, it could be, let's say 4 hours, whatever it is, but, have direct oversight or whatever it is. But last thing you want to do is provide a sanction to the inmate that they're in agreement with. And also, I would say this, Joe mentioned it before, and this kind of bleeds into this part here, is if you have an inmate that really does need some level of control on their behavior, so you wind up having to write them up for, let's say, a minor charge and provide them with a sanction, I would like to believe that your partner and all shifts are in agreement. So whenever that sanction has to be carried out, we could trust it's being carried out effectively and to the standards of where it's supposed to be met. Now, if by chance you feel, and it shouldn't be this way, but it could happen, that Joe is going to be a little bit more lenient, then I'll go ahead and tell Joe, I wrote that inmate up. Don't lock him in or don't give him the work until I come in tomorrow, because I'm the one that wrote him up. I want to be responsible for the sanction. And I don't take that as a personal thing. I just take that as, hey, I'm following through with this level of accountability here. I want to make sure in the long term this inmate knows I'm not messing around. So at this point here, it's not retaliatory. I'm just going to come in and make sure that the sanction to hold the person accountable is within my expectation. So I know that my effort to write the charge and hold them accountable, I held some weight. What's your thoughts on that, Joe? And if Russ, if you have anything you want to say, we can come back because I added some stuff to that. But Joe, what's your thoughts on it provides the inmate for accountability for their actions?
Yeah, I mean, that ultimately they have to be accountable for their actions. It's a must in the agency, and like you said, delivering sanctions. When it comes to recreation, or visits down here on the minor level, I could give you up to 30 days of recreation restriction. I can give you up to 30 days of contact visit suspension. I could give you up to 30 days of telephone. And when it goes to the major level, they can take 90 days at a shot and take your good time. So, delivering the right sanctions, to an inmate at the disciplinary hearing level, it really does matter. For me, I hit them where it hurts. I either took their commissary, take their contact visits. You have offenders that like to stay in their cell and don't come out for recreation. So what is the use of issuing recreation restriction? Like I said, it doesn't really solve the problem with accountability. So we just, we need to make sure that we're getting the inmate's attention, during the sanction process. But ultimately we're there to provide, rules and regulations to hold them accountable. The reason why they're there is because they couldn't abide by the rules and regulations out in the free world. Therefore, one of our missions is to promote positive behavior change in the offenders. And we have to do that by holding them accountable.
And I love that, because some people mix accountability with punitive, and I mean, do they intertwine? Hell yeah, they do, because it's the perspective of the individual being written up. I'm writing them up because I want to hold them accountable. They take it as being punitive, but all because they see it subjectively that way doesn't mean that my effort to hold them accountable isn't there. So however they perceive it, if you want to say it's intertwined, yeah, based on their perspective. But at the end of the day, is there a punitive measure when it comes to holding people accountable? Yeah, I would think so, because at the end of the day, whatever their negative behavior is had a consequence to it that we need to deter. The last one is, and I love this one. This is one that Russ said, was it provides a snapshot into what staff is dealing with on a daily basis. And that was personal to Russ. Russ, you want to comment on that? Because that's a good one. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, this kind of falls a little bit into intelligence gathering and so forth. If we're having, the same issues with the same inmates or a subset of inmates, it might point to a larger security breach as a whole. If all of a sudden, you're having to write all these disciplinaries with regards to stuff being stolen from the kitchen or whatever, it might point to some kind of nefarious activity being there, or it might point to, they have a brand new way of breaching security. It might be that, someone has taken upon themselves to monetize that activity. I've seen that before where, someone tells everyone else, hey, you're not stealing anything out of this kitchen unless you pay me, part of it. And then, it just becomes a factor where someone is getting rich off of that. This is how prison and jail hustles work, where, somebody's able to capitalize and leverage, a position of trust in regards to that. I've seen inmates try and sell people actual, not guilty findings in some of these very disciplinary things that we're talking about by taking one thing that the lieutenants told them and writing it and somehow slipping it on by. So this is where we need to be cognizant of, what the stats say, and to be looking at, where we can make a bigger impact on doing things that tamp down on these things, more kitchen security. In the last one that I mentioned about, maybe we're having, a sudden, big run on, hey, everybody's getting tattoos. Well, what's going on? Somebody might be smuggling in some equipment to do tattoos. I've seen that happen before, believe it or not. Or we might just have become lax in the way that we're approaching, actually tamping down on tattooing, be it the ink or inmate manufactured tattoo guns and things like that. So pay attention. Those things that you see when you have sudden flare-ups tell you about things that are going on in your yard that you may not otherwise be seeing and be experiencing. But that will give you an insight.
Yeah, and I want to add something. It does complement what Russ said. Is part of the snapshot, at least for custody staff, is that we want people to know that the accountability efforts are needed because we have to manage the inmates. And then there are people from the outside that may push rehabilitation, not knowing they are intertwined. I mean, you got to hold people accountable before you can rehabilitate, because that's part of rehabilitation. I don't like when they're treated separately. I don't like when people will negate the need for accountability because they put rehabilitation up here and they don't see the partnership. Maybe the guy loves visits and he did something foolish. And at this point here, that's the only leverage I have to hold that person accountable. So I go to take away the visits and someone says, well, the visits are needed for rehabilitation. It's like, yeah, but we're not even at that level because the person's still committing to these actions. So having said that, I think that the both sides, the custody side and the rehabilitation side, have to be in line with how these two shake hands. Accountability and rehabilitation shake hands with each other. They're in partnership. And at the end of the day, you don't want to see them as isolated. You want to see them in their constant effort to work together. Because at the end of the day, the last thing you want is for custody to maintain a good housing unit, pushing for accountability, but then for it to be thrown out because people see rehabilitation as separate from accountability. And again, the people that make it separate are the ones that get written up, because what they'll do is they know they have to be held accountable, but they'll subjectively interpret the accountability part, so the sanction part, as being punitive. And then once you say the word punitive, people wonder, well, where's the value of rehabilitation behind that? Don't get lost in that play of words. Don't get lost when an inmate exchanges accountability for being punitive, and all of a sudden rehabilitation doesn't exist in the model of punitive. No, the accountability and punitive should never be equated or exchanged as if they're equal words. If the person did something wrong, the rehabilitation side could correct the inmate by saying, I'm sorry, what's the punitive side of it all? Because there's a level of accountability that must be addressed before we can make any effort to rehabilitate. And I think that does hold weight. Joe, what's your thoughts on the snapshot? That was a good thought by Russ.
The snapshots on the facility level are great because, it gives the senior warden or senior administrator a snapshot into actually, what the upticks and downticks are on the facility, what's on the rise and what's on the fall. If these are being sent off the unit, like to the ivory towers, and, we got to be careful with these because, and I'll tell you why, and I'll give you an example. After PREA came out, we had, a buttload of alleged sexual assaults. There were a lot of them were just, being manipulative to, get moved to a housing area with their homeboy, or, get moved to a cell with their homeboy, or whatever. So, even though they claim alleged sexual assault, we go through the PREA process and all that, and we're logging all of these. When they go into a file, the word alleged seems to fall off. So, when people in the ivory tower see these stats that, we've had, 300 cases of sexual assault, or God forbid, a congressman or a state rep gets a hold of these stats or these snapshots to show that, we have 300 sexual assaults, the first thing is, oh, what the hell is going on in your facility with all these sexual assaults? You're up by 350%, and then we got to turn around and just, let them know, hey, no, these are just alleged sexual assaults. How we report things matter, especially when it goes off unit. So, snapshots on the same facility, which we all deal with every day on that facility, we have a better intake of knowing what's going on, because a warden could go, damn, I had 250 alleged sexual assaults for the month of April. And, he can kind of determine, okay, by looking, okay, these were just alleged sexual assaults. They were unsubstantiated or unfounded, or, but even though, in the state of Texas, when we get an alleged sexual assault made by an offender, we have to report that to an emergency action center. And that's actually law, regardless if it's unsubstantiated or unfounded, or it didn't happen, or whatever the case may be. So we need to make sure that our snapshots are true and correct. Like I said, once they leave the unit level, they tend to get misinterpreted a lot. But it's a good tool for wardens, majors, captains, hell, even lieutenants to see. If you have a rise, you got a rise in contraband, we got to start asking ourselves, or is this contraband coming in by visitation? Is this contraband coming in by my staff? What do I need to start looking at to curtail some of this? Do I need to do more, more than just random searches on my staff? Do we need to shake down the facility more often? It gives you a basic tool to kind of, narrate what you're going to do next. So, I mean, ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it's a good thing. We just need to be careful when no stats, no snapshots leave the unit level and go to the regional or, the ivory tower level. We need to make sure that, the snapshots are actually true and correct, that other people can actually interpret and understand what's going on in our facilities.
Guys, I think recently we've done a lot of good, really heartfelt discussions on managing inmate behavior, that it would be great if all three of us could partner on that book and get it out there. These are evergreen. Guys, when we write something, we don't write things that are, situational and can change. We write principles. I mean, we write things that are everlasting. I think these last couple of shows that we've done, I mean, this is one, but I'm looking at my list of recent shows that we've done on managing inmate behavior. We have a lot here, guys. The last couple of episodes, stuff to help with rookies. There's just a lot here. If you guys go down the list, you'll see there's stuff for rookies, stuff for senior staff. I think as we discussed this, we may have one more book in the future. If I wasn't doing the leadership book now, I would probably just jump on this automatically and go through these last couple episodes, because sometimes you have like 11 tips here for dealing with unruly inmates. Each one could be a chapter in itself. Everything we talked about just now could be a chapter in itself. We partner that book, send it out to the world. It's an amazing gift we're giving back to the profession. All right, so let's get some closing thoughts. I thought this was a great episode, but Joe, what you have anything you'd like to say in closing, sir?
Yeah, I know we kind of got away from the original intent of the show. Talking about the officer that submitted the email from a juvenile facility, and let me start out by saying to that officer, I tip my hat to you. I don't have the patience. I don't think I could do it. I raised my own kids. That was bad enough. But when it comes to the writing of disciplinaries, just kind of use common sense. I'm not saying that you have to write everything or you don't have to write everything. Just kind of use a common sense approach to know, if this is a first time offender, if they're still trying to learn the layout of the facility, will a verbal correct his actions, versus the ones that are repetitive. Once you get experience, into the profession, and I'm not saying 1, 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, sometimes it takes longer. I mean, you'll kind of feel your way around and you'll know when putting that paperwork in their life is appropriate and when putting that paperwork in their life is not appropriate or, unjustified. So, just use the common sense approach. Nobody's saying that you have to write them all or don't write them all. I mean, there's really no right or wrong answer. There's really no right or wrong decision in that process. Just be safe in what you do.
Yeah, and I want to compliment something real quick, Joe. Made me think, but I don't want to lose the thought. When you decide if you're going to write someone or not, basically, I think one of the things that does matter when you're trying to figure it out is this a problem that you could solve, that what's in your pay scale, or is this a problem that needs to be deferred? That's another way to look at it too. Is this a problem that is going to require the need for outside involvement? Because again, when you write something, even if it's small and you write it, it may require someone to come in and manage those efforts, where maybe it's like, I could still make an effort at this. So again, there are certain things that you have to write because the effort to resolve is out of your pay grade. And then there are things that are within your pay grade to resolve, but you have to decide if you want to resolve them or not. And for me, if I needed a supervisor's involvement, it's truly because I've exhausted all effort at my level to resolve that matter. And at this point here, I'm asking for assistance. And because I didn't ask for it on a regular basis, most people were willing to give me it. It wasn't like I was just deferring everything. It's just at this point I've tried, and I would definitely have my efforts documented at that point before assistance was required. Any closing thoughts, Russ?
Yeah, I love that Joe brought us back around to that, because I wanted to get in on that too, and just say that when you're dealing with juveniles, remember this is that they are at a lower level of maturity than the adult offender, and the adult offender is often closer to a juvenile than you would think, just by the fact of the kind of whether you want to call it trauma that's been in their life, the way that they've been dealt with their whole life. And so the juvenile offender is, even, further, back on the road to maturity. So anytime that you are making progress with, individual juveniles, I would say try and lay off of the paper route if you possibly can, engage with them and try and bring out the best in them that you possibly can, because they are really probably the only population where you're actually going to be able to save more than just a few. You're going to run into a lot of them that you can't save. Period. I just had a week like you wouldn't believe with just coming across some past. I don't want to call them failures of mine because I don't think anything could have saved them, but just where I've had these encounters with them as adult offenders now, and just wondering, man, I guess nothing that we did with these particular individuals worked. But there are many that I am also seeing where it has worked. So keep your eye on the prize is what I'm trying to say, and just know that if you're making progress, don't worry about the writing part of it. If you're too heavy-handed in the writing part of it, they'll think that there's nothing that they can do right, and you have to actually provide some positive reinforcement to get the results that you want. And it's hard. My hats go off. I had the opportunity to get back into the juvenile thing, and I loved what I did and in the years that I did it. But I just decided that, at this time in my life, I felt like I was just not ready to go back in and pick that up again. So I really appreciate what you do, though, sir. Really, truly, there's so few, positive victories that we get out of things. Often we get victories, but they're negative victories. Hey, I made a dope bust. Hey, I broke up a fight. Hey, I did this and I did that. Most of the positive stuff that I've experienced in corrections has been in the juvenile side of things.
Yeah, and I think his email did definitely spark a very good dialogue. So thank you for asking the question. I just want to mention one thing in my closing. We know in corrections, there's so many different situations, and they aren't difficult. They're complex, and they're forever evolving if they're not addressed. What we try to do when we provide our dialogue is, one, we look to see if there's a way we can connect situations at a higher, more general perspective, because that helps us provide a filter. And that's tough because that's trying to look at every unique situation that can come your way and find commonalities to draw a general picture that we can help filter what our information is. But the other thing we also do is we can't put consistency in the situation, but we try to put consistency in you and how you deal with the situation. So the dialogue here is usually filtered from a generality because we find commonalities. That's why at the very beginning, we wanted to kind of put emphasis on a nuisance charge and a serious charge, because we thought those would be two commonalities or two generalizations that we could filter from and basically express how some of those commonalities would fall into a serious charge or fall into a nuisance charge. And then with that said, what makes our dialogue unique, myself, Russ, Joe, the people we have on the show, is that we can't look for consistency in every situation we face, because it's not. You're dealing with human behavior. It's going to be all over the place. But with that said, we could draw from some of those generalities that have commonalities and then find some consistency in you and how you're able to draw from that consistency. So it's here. So when you guys look at this dialogue, know for a fact that the courage is on you and how you apply it. That's the key. It's not, it's not just knowledge, just to sit on knowledge. It's literally how you apply the information being provided. And I would like to, in the future, me, Joe, and Russ, have that discussion on how you maintain, not just the connection to the profession, but the ongoing ability to continue to teach people in the profession when you have been removed from it. So now you're either retired or whatnot. And how do you keep growing? Where do you apply your knowledge? Because we had this discussion the other day. We're still going to keep ourselves learning so we can go ahead and teach others. But how do we apply what we're learning? Will I still be interested in the books I'm reading now when I can't apply it? I really want to have that discussion. That's going to be a discussion I'm really, really looking forward to. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.